Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're talking about Disobedience today, which is a romantic drama set in North London, set in the North London Orthodox Jewish community. I didn't know anything about this, I don't think. So when the film opens on a sort of a lecture or dissertation being given by an elderly rabbi, I thought, this is interesting. Is it going to be sort of, I don't know, is it only going to be Jewish just now, and then it'll move on to something else, and that's kind of introducing a kind of overarching idea or kind of thematic framework? But no, actually, it's kind of Jewish all the way through. And as a Jew myself, as an English Jew myself, part of the enjoyment of the film, at least for the first half or so, was in seeing so many things that I recognised being represented.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which was quite good fun. I think something that you said in the podcast on shoplifters, which was Japanese, is that when you see a film that's about a different culture, part of the enjoyment is just seeing what do they eat, how do they live, how do they do this, that, and the other. Like that's just, it's interesting.
Yes.
And then kind of taken from another side, it's interesting to see something that is not normally represented, but that you recognise being represented. And you feel kind of quite faithfully.
Yes.
So I mean, there are elements that don't match up to what my experience of being Jewish is, but nonetheless, it's very interesting to see. I particularly enjoyed when they say Shabbos instead of Shabbat. You know, Shabbat is kind of the way that you would read it off a piece of paper, but if you're Jewish, then you kind of you learn to pronounce it Shabbos. That's how everyone says it.
Right.
That's kind of that's just very nice to sort of see represented.
Right.
So I enjoyed that.
You enjoyed that aspect of the film, or the film altogether?
I did. I had issues with the film, but I think, as I've said before, a happy ending kind of affects your view of the entire thing, and I was very moved at the end, and so that colours the way I saw the rest of it. But I was never bored, but I did think at a lot of points this is quite banal.
Oh, I didn't think that for a minute.
Really?
Yes, I loved it from the beginning. And actually, I couldn't understand my own reaction because I was almost on the verge of tears throughout. Like, it deeply moved me.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I kind of, you instantly, and I guess maybe it resonates in a personal way, but the story is basically...
Spoilers will be coming up.
Yes.
There are plot developments that are easy to spoil, and we're going to talk about them right away. So it's very much worth seeing, as blank as possible, but we're going to get into spoiler territory.
This rabbi, this very important scholar of the Torah, dies, and his daughter is told to go back to London. It turns out that she actually wasn't even warned that he was ill. We found out subsequently that it's this other rabbi's wife who warned her that he was dead. So she went as a dutiful daughter to honor her father, and then kind of finds out that he's disinherited her. And then we find out that she'd had a childhood crush with the girl who is now married to the boy that she grew up with, who was her father's disciple.
Right, so the women are played by... Rachel Weisz is the rabbi's daughter, who lives in New York and comes back. Rachel McAdams plays Esty, who is the girl that she grew up with. And the husband and student of the rabbi is David, played by Alessandro Nivola.
That's right. So basically what we get to see is that this trio of characters had grown up together, right? And there's deep feelings amongst all of them. And actually you sense that from the very beginning. I mean, I initially thought, that, what's his name? David was her brother, right? So
right.
Kind of, but clearly what you have is somebody who's been cast out, right, from her community, and who kind of returns, and who is kind of greeted begrudgingly. So everybody, says the right things, everybody's polite, but everybody's also at a distance, and everybody kind of keeps her away. So I think kind of, the situation alone, imagine kind of finding out that your father's dead, that you arrive, you're the only daughter, you arrive, and then kind of you're treated as if you don't belong there, and everybody's trying to pretend that, kind of he didn't have a daughter. I mean, just from that very beginning, I was so moved. And, the kind of the culture clashes between kind of the world that she's coming from and the world that she's going into, and then the slow revelation of kind of these relationships that seem to kind of deepen at each instance. I mean, the beautiful thing about this film is that nothing is simple, right? Like kind of, things resonate. I can't think of a single like unsympathetic character really, right? Like kind of.
No, not entirely. Maybe the uncle. He's not entirely unsympathetic, but he is the least sympathetic. But he's concerned for, I guess, the sort of stability of the community. But there is a story of kind of societal pressure, stopping these two women from being able to express their love for each other, which is what it is. It's not just a crush; they love each other.
Yes,
and he is a significant. He's a keystone in that societal pressure, keeping them apart, I think.
Part of the complications of the film is Rachel McAdams and Rachel Weisz, as teenagers, had an affair, and they were caught in bed by Rachel Weisz's father. That's kind of what sparked or what unraveled kind of certain things. So, but there's very interesting connotations that Rachel Weisz's sexual preferences are much more fluid than actually Rachel McAdams, who subsequently married David, but who nonetheless, identifies very fully as a lesbian, and as a lesbian who has kind of, shut herself off from her feelings and desires, yet nonetheless has a hankering and a love for Rachel Weisz, and in fact is responsible for bringing her back into London.
Yeah. Well, actually, what I kind of saw in Rachel McAdams was not. It's true that she has kind of, she does appear to have kind of shut herself off, as you say, sexually, but also it seemed to be like, she wasn't even interested in other women, almost. Like it was really like for her, it seemed to just be about Rachel Weisz's character, all of her kind of emotional sort of, I don't know, like accessibility or whatever, kind of came through that. Whereas Rachel Weisz was like, they discuss it. She'd had the kind of odd sort of vague dalliance with other women in New York, but nothing that was kind of satisfying or compared to her love for Rachel McAdams' character. There is a difference, and it's funny with Rachel McAdams' character because Rachel Weisz is Jewish, and Rachel McAdams is not, and I think knowing that kind of influenced the way I saw the character a little bit. And I think it's also because right at the start of the film, when she goes to the house where they're having the I forget the word for it, shiva,
yeah, okay.
And they go to the shiva, and everyone's there sort of paying their respects and mourning, and everyone says, I wish you long life,
yes.
Which is what you say to a Jewish person who's been bereaved. So you meet Rachel McAdams' character, and initially I thought, okay, well, I'm not convinced of her. I'm not because of the actress. I'm not convinced of her as a Jewish person. And there's also this thing about her being very frum. One of the characters makes mention, you've become very frum. Rachel Weisz says that, frum meaning very orthodox, very observant, right? In the way and you see it in the way she dresses and so on. And so I thought maybe she actually was a Jewish convert. And that she would be kind of so overdoing the kind of performance of being Jewish for that reason. As it turns out, that's not the case. She is supposed to have been grown up Jewish like everyone else. But there is a kind of costuming in Rachel McAdams' character all the way through, where I think the fact that I never quite believed her as Jewish because of the actor is not such a bad thing, because I never quite believed anything that the character was doing, because she's controlling herself always and putting forward an image of herself that isn't quite true. And it's towards the end of the film when she starts to become more emotionally available and open herself up that that's when I started to find her quite moving, and you know, kind of believe in her more and that sort of thing.
I mean, it's hard for anyone next to Rachel Weisz to make the impact that they would normally do, because Rachel Weisz, she's so beautiful. I mean, she is gobsmackingly beautiful. You know, kind of just looking at her is a pleasure. And also, she's so intelligent, right? You know, and that's kind of like an odd combination. And maybe because she's so intelligent, her face also evokes a kind of sadness, you know? I mean, it's almost like kind of knowing the world is to be sad about the world. Yeah, to me, she always evokes kind of, you know, someone who knows about the world, who's kind of knowing and sad about it, actually. She's like a kind of a walking wound. And so I think anybody who's next to her just, you know...
I didn't mean any criticism of Rachel McAdams' performance when I said that.
No, I like her very much.
I was talking about the way that the character came across to me, and going what informed that. And I think Rachel McAdams is extremely good in this.
Yes.
And I think actually the performances are easily the best thing about the film. What you're always talking, or at least recently, you're always talking about people being emotionally transparent.
Yes.
There's just, this film is full of emotional transparency. You read everything in these characters' faces and gestures and the way they look at each other. There's all these looks, particularly when they go to Rachel Weisz's father's house to kind of look through the possessions, and it's Weisz and McAdams, and Rachel McAdams is looking at her, and they just see shots of her. Rachel Weisz goes off, and Rachel McAdams stands back watching her, and there's just this kind of longing and mystery in her eyes.
Yeah,
I think it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I think the whole film is beautiful, and actually, you know, it really had me on the edge of tears throughout. You know, it was, and part of it is because I think you have the whole community, everyone in it is in their own terms nice, or at least trying to do the right thing. Everyone's trying to do the right thing, and everyone's trying to be ethical and behave well and behave with honor, you know, which is a word that's kind of used in the film quite a lot.
Yeah,
right.
I picked up on the word honor as well.
And kind of life gets in the way, and conflicting desires get in the way, you know, and kind of life makes it difficult, you know, to be honorable. But it's in that kind of space, you know, between the attempt to be honorable, the need to be honorable, the desire to be honorable, and then kind of the curveballs that life throws at you. Yeah, that I think so much of the film's power resides, actually, because it doesn't give anyone an easy out, you know. I was very touched by the husband as well, you know.
In what way?
Well, because he is an example of that. He is a thinking man. He's an intellectual. You know, he thinks about these issues, right? That's kind of, you know...
That is the Jewish thing. That's what
a
student
scholar
and a rabbi does. Yeah.
That's right. You know,
I do agree. I think that the film threatens late on to turn him into a bastard when Rachel McAdams is opening up to him, saying, "Yeah, I've always felt this way," and sort of saying, "This has been a bit of a charade, and I want." She says, "I want my freedom." At one point, his voice, you know, raises and becomes quite stern. And the film threatens to turn him into a sort of...
There's a moment where it could turn violent, isn't there?
Yes, exactly.
You know?
And actually there's a point where he says... It's the argument in the kitchen when the voices get raised, and he says, do you want to get hurt again? What he means there is, do you want to get emotionally hurt again by opening yourself up and then having Rachel Weisz leave again?
Yeah.
But for a split second you think, is he talking about physical violence?
Yes.
At least I did. Just for a split second.
I didn't interpret it that way coming from him. I did interpret.
But there was an explosion of kind of.
But there was
in that scene.
Yeah, and actually, to be fair, you know, her sexual re-encounter with
Rachel
Weisz is destroying his life, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You know, so his social position, his new job, his status in the community, you know, his house potentially, you know, kind of. So, you know, even before you're told that he is a father to be, that she is carrying his child now, Rachel McAdams, you know that, you know, her request for freedom from him is a great sacrifice, because it will ruin his life, or it will ruin all the plans he's built up for his life anyway.
Sacrifice is exactly the word, because when he gives up the job, he's going to become the new rabbi, and it's quite clear. It's never said explicitly, but it is quite clear that the two of them splitting up will mean that the rabbi thing isn't going to happen for him. The community is just too kind of tight knit for that to happen.
Yes,
and
too conservative.
Too conservative. That's the word. And he's on the bimmer. And it's when he should be accepting this position, and that's when he says, it's sort of in code because no one else understands it, but it is directly to Rachel McAdams. "You are free,"
yes.
he says, and then he says, "I can't accept this position," and he leaves. And that, for me, that whole, maybe not that scene exactly, but then it's the embrace afterwards, and he invites Rachel Weisz into the embrace.
Yes, I thought
that was the most moving thing for me in the film.
Beautiful.
And it's his sacrifice.
Actually, I think the whole film is beautiful, because you see, from the very beginning, so the film opens up on this discussion of freedom and choice. Yeah, the kind of the freedom to disobey. I mean, I didn't register every word of it, and actually I'd like to see that bit again. But that's what it was about, right? It was Rachel Weisz's father, the day before he died, or the day of his death.
The day he dies.
Yeah, kind of giving the speech to the community at the synagogue about, the importance of disobedience, the fact that people have choice.
He's talking about the creation, and he says God created the angels and the beasts and man. And man is the only one who has the free will to disobey. We have free will. That's the central thing.
That's right. Okay, so you have free will, you have choice, you can disobey. And actually, the beginning is then bounded by this moment of reassertion of choice, which is when David kind of offers his wife her freedom in the synagogue in front of their community, which is very, very close to the end. Right? So you have these two moments of disquisition on disobedience, freedom, and choice, which actually are really bounded by these women's oppression and exile, and kind of, kept at bay from this community that is very kind of, in many ways clearly regulated by men, right?
Oh yeah.
So kind of, and I think it's very important that that this is laid out, that the kind of the freedom to choose and so on is kind of laid out, but at the same time boundaried by these two disquisitions on choice are actually kind of moments in which you see how the community entraps, slightly coerces, so in some ways it comforts and it makes easy, in other ways it prevents choice. So, and I was very kind of glad both to see that, but also to see that the film went beyond that.
Yes.
Right. And I think this is why the film is so great, because it kind of dramatically conveys, all of these complexities in a way that makes them kind of legible, not only emotionally, which I found they very much are, but actually kind of, connotatively as well, it kind of, and dramatically.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay, well, I didn't think you would disagree, but I wondered...
No, but I had nothing to add, really. Problems that I had with the film... I think the look of the film is actually appropriate, but I didn't like it. It felt quite visually dull. Certainly the colour palette is. But actually, the reason that it feels appropriate is, I guess it feels kind of Jewish in that you don't tend to get a lot of adornment in Judaism, kind of in synagogues and things. You don't tend to get kind of filthy lucre, gold and thing hanging. Maybe on the Torah scrolls and that sort of thing, you get the kind of they can be kind of done up quite nicely. But for the most part, you don't kind of get these kind of great, extraordinary kind of gilded cathedrals in Judaism, that sort of thing. And indeed, kind of being quite frum, that sort of thing. I mean, when you see Rachel McAdams' character at the start and they talk about her being frum, that's associated with wearing just the dowdiest,
yes.
sort of clothes, and just really kind of not showing off or anything like that. And the look of the film in the colour palette kind of reflects that. It's very muted, not particularly exciting to look at, frankly.
It's grey, earthy, white, wintry colours.
Yeah. So it does feel appropriate, but I think it could look better somehow. It felt a little bland to me.
I want to reserve judgment on that, because, you see, we went into this film really, I didn't even know what we were seeing.
Right? No, nor did I.
So it came as a complete surprise. And I thought the same as you. And then I saw the credits. And so my initial thing was, well, here's a good kind of counterpoint to my way normally of talking about film, because I put so much emphasis on the visual, right? It's kind of, I think it's very important to the way things work. It's kind of primary to the way that things work, and kind of I always comment on it. And I thought, well, this is a corrective, because you can have great films, without kind of visual pyrotechnics or necessarily anything that stands out, that actually, character, situation, and acting by people like, Rachel Weisz is enough, right? I thought it was really great. It had me moved, and I didn't feel manipulated. It had me moved about complex things, so you don't have to be necessarily kind of visually extraordinary. But then I saw the credits, and then I realized it was Sebastian Lelio, I think, or Lelio, who was the director of A Fantastic Woman. And I remember watching The Fantastic Woman.
Sebastian Lelio.
Yeah. And, thinking very much the same things. And then I wrote a blog post on it, and I just saw the film again, and I saw it on a computer, which meant that you could go back and forth on images. And then I realized that actually it had some extraordinary images, right? And that I just hadn't noticed, I hadn't paid attention. And then it kind of made me think that, I wonder if that's also the case here. So there are a few things that you notice, right? So the moment where he makes his decision to kind of free his wife, this is David, that you see him behind a door that kind of...
Yeah, it has... The glass is like it's many lenses. I don't know what the kind of word for the design is, but it's a kind of glass that I've seen in a lot of shuls.
Yeah, it's a glass that kind of prevents you from seeing what's on the other side. It allows light in, but you can't see the image.
Yeah,
right. And actually, that's a wonderful metaphor for what happens.
And it splits up the image of him into many kind of vertical bars.
Yes, you get a distorted image, but you see light through it. So, which I thought was a wonderful metaphor for what was happening. And then it made me wonder, are there other things that maybe I'm missing, that I wasn't paying attention to? I mean, I don't think the film needs them, right? I'm just kind of wondering.
I think that's probably the case, and seeing it again, it would probably feel more poetic and kind of coherent in that sense. Not that it was incoherent, but it would feel like it's you feel like you make more sense of the imagery in a way, or see more in it.
I just loved it, and I'll need time to process it.
I mean, what I did like as well, in fact, it's a shot that I went from disliking to liking while it was happening, is again in the scene on the bimmer when he's giving his wife her freedom, and he starts to he gets a speech out of his pocket that he was supposed to be making, and he realizes he can't do it, and he starts going off the cuff, and it's very close up and very shallow focus. There's quite a few shots in the film of this type, but this one in particular has him moving around on the bimmer, and because the depth of field is so shallow, he goes in and out of focus quite a lot, and the focus puller is clearly kind of trying to catch up to him as he goes back and forth in depth. So initially it looks almost unprofessional, and I didn't like it. But then actually I kind of thought the shot became really a reflection of his mental state, because it's a shot in which he is in emotional turmoil and he's on the fly making a great sort of important and sort of a decision of great magnitude to him and his life and the people he cares about. So actually, it's a long enough take that I went from not liking this and finding it bad looking to really getting it.
Yes.
Somehow, which I quite which was interesting.
I loved how So she arrives in London, and slowly things are revealed, you know, and obviously the most important is that the person who's died is her father. Nobody's paying attention to her. And actually everybody's hesitant to embrace her. You're not supposed to touch. You're not supposed to embrace. Everything is always kept at a distance. So people hesitantly, and after a pause, say, may you live a long life.
Yeah.
But really, even that seems a bit begrudging. And certainly no touching. Every time they go to touch, there's like a pulling away, right? And I mean, I didn't know if that was like, you know, because it was a woman, or because it was a Shiva, or because...
I mean, I personally don't know exactly. I don't know if there's... No, I mean, you do touch people, like, if, you know, if someone's bereaved or whatever, you touch them on the arm, you know, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, it is more a personal thing in this film, I think, that she has been, as you say, cast out.
Yes.
And no one expected her back.
And no one expected her back. So, but actually, there was also a thing where, you know, she was touching and kissing the women, but not the men. Yeah, it was like...
Sure, yeah.
You know, so I wondered if there was something. Anyway, but
they're Orthodox, but they're not ultra-Orthodox. Like, these aren't the Jews that you see on planes in Israel sitting in plastic bags to keep themselves separated from women. So it's not quite at that level.
No.
But,
no, I'm, you know,
yeah.
I kind of...
Those guys are
I'm a bit familiar. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. So, but anyway, just to say that introduction makes the embrace of the three at that critical moment, you know, so moving, right? Because it is an embrace, it is touching, and it's almost unconditional. Like, you know, it feels almost like, I don't know, an image of love, yeah? That kind of all of a sudden there's no barriers, there's no society, there's no people watching, there's no witnessing, you know, you can just embrace and kind of bring into the fold, you know. I thought that was so beautiful. That's
a good point, but actually I felt that more that was the case. I found that very, very moving, but the reason I found it moving was more for the decision that Dovid had made,
yes.
And the way he was, and so he was expressing it wordlessly through inviting Rachel Weisz into this hug, and also and he was already hugging his wife, who
yes.
you know he's made a huge sacrifice for her. So it was about his decision. That was what moved me, as opposed to exactly how it was expressed. But what really moved me in terms of physicality was when the girls first kiss. Because I did feel kind of keenly that there had been just such a restriction of touching. You felt their need to do that when they did, and actually it was kind of a release for me as an audience member, kind of going like the moment that they kissed, I kind of realised no one's touched anyone in this film. Everything's been so restrictive. Everyone's been so isolated, and the fact and when they did it, that's when I kind of realised how important it was.
Yes,
yeah.
I love the sex scenes, and part of the reason why I love, you know, I mean, sex can be many things, and we see it in film from pornography onwards in many ways. But the thing that you rarely get is, in fact, almost never. You know, it's a great loss, you know, to culture and humanity as a whole, is that you very rarely see sex as feeling. You know, which of course, you know, it's almost like the most important thing, really, you know. And actually what I thought was so beautiful about this film is that it is just that, right? Like it is kind of, you know, it's sex as sex, but sex is a conduit to feeling. It breaks, you know, it opens up all of these things. Like you said, you know, there'd been all these barriers to touch. So actually kind of, you know, that is bridged. And it's bridged not only by desire and by a sexual act of some kind, but actually you can see it's like an overflowing of feeling. Yeah, the kind of, now you're in this hotel room and you can let go, yeah, and express.
I wasn't crazy about the sex scene. Don't know why. This was some of the stuff that felt kind of banal to me. Is once they had kind of broken that initial barrier and kissed in the upstairs room in the dad's house, it was followed up by just more kissing every now and again, and you kind of felt, okay, so they're re-engaging and they're kind of rediscovering.
Oh no, I love that.
But that felt banal to me.
No.
And then they got into their time and it felt more banal.
No.
No, just that's the way I felt about it. It felt inexpressive to me.
No, I thought it was the opposite, because I thought it was like about the messiness of feeling. So, you know, they'd obviously had an affair. She's cast out. It's very tentative. It's very dangerous. One doesn't know how the other is feeling. Like, there's, are you doing this for the past? I mean, what position are you putting me in? Like, there's all these hesitancies and awkwardnesses and messiness, which is what happens when you have feelings for somebody, but you don't know how they feel about you, and you're also in an awkward situation, and kind of you don't know what the score is, and you don't have a map of where this thing is going to go. So actually, I thought all of those moments to me were beautiful.
I think I'd like it more on the second viewing, knowing everything that I know now, because part of, I think, what I didn't like about it is that for me it came out of nowhere. I didn't anticipate, and I didn't pick up or anything like that that these two were hot for each other, if you like, whatever, emotion, sort of in love and whatever. So when they kissed, as I said, I mean, I did feel that kind of that physical connection was important, but I did kind of roll my eyes a little bit when they first kissed and went, oh right, so that's what it is it? And part of the problem for me was that for much of the opening of the film, in fact, for probably up until that point, probably up until they kiss, the storytelling is elliptical to the point of absurdity, where it's people talking about people that you don't know, people speaking realistically to each other, like not using names when they already know who they're talking about, but for the audience, you don't know, and so there is stuff being withheld from the audience. There is this whole thing about, well, you left, and they obviously all know why she left, and they obviously all know what this history is, but you don't, and it is being withheld from the audience to a point where it's distracting.
Oh, I didn't find it distracting. I thought it was interesting.
No, I found it deeply distracting, and at points I was thinking, get on with it, tell me the fucking story now. Stop hiding it. So that was an issue, and it did mean that when it got to their physical connection, and then they started kissing all over the place, and then it got to the sex scene, I was kind of thinking, okay, so I had little context for it, and it was only as the film further developed later on that you kind of began to learn and appreciate the depth of their love for each other, and then the depth and the complexity of what this meant for their lives now. That's when it kind of emotionally developed for me. Up until then, I found it very dissatisfying.
Oh no, I didn't. I was enjoying all of those elements, really.
For me, it's a film that improved very much later on as I started to understand the characters better.
No, for me, it started off great and then it continued. Even though, I don't know what I expected, but maybe, visual pyrotechnics or something. I mean, I suppose I wanted, like, striking images or whatever. And actually, kind of, the images... So, for example, there was that moment where they kiss and, they go revisit the places they loved as teenagers, and they end up under a tree where they first kissed. And you think, fucking hell, why didn't they make this a more, wow moment or a more dazzling moment? Yeah, like, it's just a long shot of this wintry landscape, and, it doesn't seem to have much going for it, right? And then you realize, like, the tree is like this white cedar, or, like, it's white, it's wintry, the branches are empty, kind of, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's like, it feels like an industrial estate in a field in an industrial estate or something, right?
Yeah, it's in a park.
Yeah, and then it becomes kind of very evocative and moving, and about kind of, their connection amidst this, the fact that kind of, they haven't had this for a while, and that it's something that's kind of lost and you don't know whether it's recoverable.
That shot for me became evocative when she returned to it. When you are led to believe or given clues that Rachel McAdams is going to kill herself because Rachel Weisz is moving back to New York and abandoning her, then there is this search. David and Rachel Weisz's character go searching for Rachel McAdams. They don't know where she is, and one of the places that Rachel Weisz returns to is that tree, and it's this thing of, returning to the place that would mean something to, That's when that shot kind of became evocative to me, was with that context of having been there the first time. But the shot itself is just a nicely framed shot of a tree.
Well, I mean, this is the question. Is it, when is the nicely framed shot of a tree only a nicely framed shot of a tree, right? What kind of tree is it? What's the light on it? How is it? What's the composition? Anyway,
it's possible to overanalyze it, I think.
Well, I felt it as it was going. But let's move on to different things, because I think, there were other things that I just found really moving in ways also that I can't understand. First is the diegetic music, let's say, right? All these Jewish men singing whatever songs they're singing
in a choir.
I found it so moving.
They're brilliant, and you should come to the synagogue at some point, because there's nothing quite like a Jewish choir. I mean, religious singing in all its forms is amazing. You hear you hear obviously these amazing choirs you get in cathedrals and churches, where the architecture it kind of changes the sound and just makes it huge, and you get kind of in Islam again a beautiful singing, kind of one note that will just ring out over a whole
I've had
room
experiences
of people.
Of all of that.
So it's and you can totally see how as a non-religious person, you can totally see how people just fall in for it.
Sure.
It's amazing to hear, and it's the same with Jewish music, but with the choral singing, there's a melancholy that goes underneath all of it. These male voices, there's a style to it. These men always sound the same, and I don't mean they sound like each other, but I mean that the music has a style to it, and there's a tone, and I can't really explain it that much, but you definitely go on YouTube and look up some Jewish choir stuff, because it's amazing to listen to, and it very often starts off with the lead singer starting off the song, and then all the other voices will come in, providing this kind of bed that the song sits in, and it's often so sort of melancholy and sad.
Well, actually, there are shifts in notes.
Yes.
Where you get taken almost into a valley of despair, and then suffering, and then death. It's kind of every shift in notes is I don't know, it would just evoke this whole world of sadness and pain. It was just very beautiful.
And not understanding the lyrics, I think, kind of is part of that. I think not that not that lyrics would ruin it, but the fact that it's essentially gibberish, and it just means it registers on a purely emotional, evocative musical level.
I found it,
for me at least,
I found it incredibly beautiful.
In the way that listening to hymns, the chords are lovely and the voices are amazing, and the way that a church will change the music is amazing, but the words are stupid.
Well, I don't know enough about that. I have never found them so. In fact, I'm also very moved by Christian church music.
Yeah, but the words are silly.
Well, they can be, but they're not necessarily.
That's what I mean. And in Hebrew, if you understood Hebrew, the words would probably be very silly too. But not understanding Hebrew means that kind of... It's rather like when Mel Gibson made The Passion of the Christ, and he made the decision to do it all in Aramaic, which is such a good decision, because if you have this kind of torture porn Jesus movie, but then you've got...
Torture porn Jesus
This is roughly what...
No, it is what it is.
But then you have the character saying, "And oh ye of blah blah blah," it would sound very silly,
Yes. Let's go back, because I think there's two things that we haven't highlighted enough. One is that it's a film about lesbian desire.
Yep.
Right. It's at the heart of it, and the restrictions that are placed on it, by communities, and also the fact how these restrictions are kind of imbibed, so you have the feeling that it's actually a choice you've made to live within this world, and then kind of it's revealed that actually that's not quite a choice, that other choices can be made. So, and yet, what's really beautiful about this film, I think, is that the choice is a complex one. Right, so the Rachel Weisz character offers Rachel McAdams to go with her to New York, basically. And Rachel McAdams' character refuses. So, she chooses her freedom in a way, in the most difficult of circumstances, but in a loving way, right? So, she continues to live with her husband. We don't know what's going to happen. They might raise a child together. They might continue as a couple, in spite of, the fact that it's very clearly articulated that her desires are lesbian desires. She loves women, and men don't do the same thing for her. Whereas with the Rachel Weisz character, it's left more ambivalent. Yeah, her affairs seem to be primarily with men.
Okay.
So, the fact that kind of these choices are made, and that life is not just about sex, that it's full of a whole other host of complicating factors, and that both of these women acknowledge, and that also kind of, they acknowledge that whilst there never being in any doubt about the depth of the love they feel for each other, I found really beautiful and moving.
Yeah. Do you feel an element of cliche at the end when Rachel McAdams chases down the cab? This is something that actually... This is something that actually really worked for me.
I thought it could have been a cliche if she had run after Rachel McAdams, but I didn't find it a cliche when what she wanted was a picture of her father's tomb. Because her father had been her oppressor in a way, right? But also, an oppression laced with love. I mean, she wanted... Her reason for coming back is, she wanted to do the honorable thing for her father. And her question was, did her father realize that she loved him? Not that, did my father love me? It's a radically different question, right? So for her to run back to take that photo I thought it was going to be a cliche, and it ended up being surprising.
I didn't like it very much. That the photo bit at the end, and when she says goodbye, Dad. Ugh. I thought, nah, stayed. I thought it was a banality to me right at the start that she's a photographer. I just thought this is going to be some sort of artsy. I'm not going to.
But it wasn't.
I'm not going to enjoy the fact that she's a photographer. That's going to come back.
So many prejudices.
I thought it's going to come back in some fucking
Michael
way.
Glass. So many prejudices.
Yeah. And I was right. It came back in the most banal way possible. Where she said, it makes me sad that I never took a photo of my dad. And right at the end, she takes one of his grave. Ugh. But what? No, I didn't like it. But what worked for me was just before that, when she's driving off in the cab to get her flight, and Rachel McAdams chases her down, and that has cliche all over it, right? The chasing down the train that's leaving or whatever, or the whole, was it in Friends when he runs onto the plane to get her, or whatever it might be, chasing down the person that you love at the last minute type of thing, right? That's exactly what this film is doing. But it really works for me. And then what I like is that, obviously it doesn't become, and we're going to be together once I've chased you down. It just becomes a kind of a final honest sort of embrace between the two of them, and this promise to keep in touch. And what really moved me was Rachel Weisz saying, "You're going to be a brilliant mother."
Yes.
This kind of new thing that is in your life that's entirely you. That I'm so proud of you type of thing. I really, really loved. It was kind of, so it's a finality between them,
but it's not a finality, because it's also an assurance of love, but not the love that they or you expected. Yeah. So it's like these women who are going to love each other their whole lives, but they're not going to be lovers. And I thought that was lovely. And then actually, so there's that moment which you think is going to turn out into a cliche, but doesn't. And then the other moment, which is where you think, oh, Rachel Weisz has changed her mind and is going to chase after her now. And in fact, she ends up going to the father.
Oh, no, I didn't think that at all.
I thought those two things were a surprise to me.
I thought that once that embrace was over and Rachel McAdams went back to the house and the cab drove off, when she says, "Can we take a detour?" it didn't occur to me at all that she might be going back again.
So where do you think she was going?
Well, I didn't know, but it just didn't occur to me that she might go back to the house. And then obviously very quickly you discover she's gone to the grave, gone to the cemetery. So it was quite clear, but it didn't. I wasn't scared of a cliche on top of a cliche,
right,
as it were.
Okay.
As you might have been. It made me think of "Call Me by Your Name."
I thought it might,
in the combination of Jewishness and and a gay sort of love story. It's interesting because like Call Me by Your Name was primarily a story about these two gay boys.
Yes.
It kind of and Jewishness is flavors the whole thing,
Yeah.
and this is kind of the other way around to an extent. It certainly starts off as a very Jewish story, and you're embedded in Jewish culture. And actually, what I really love is that the film kind of makes no apology for anything or makes no attempt to explain anything. You are in this world where these people just behave in a slightly different way to where you're used to English people behaving.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Call Me by Your Name, because you know what a fan I was of it, really, particularly like the last shots and so on. But actually, I think to me it's a different category than this film. I think this is much the greater film, you know, in comparison to Call Me by Your Name. I do. I think it kind of it makes everything so much more complex and moving, you know, and things that have kind of ramifications, really, you know, that kind of reverberate throughout the film, much more so than.
But also what you say about at the end of this film, you know, it's very clear that these two, although they're not going to be together in a relationship, are nonetheless going to love each other very deeply throughout the rest of their lives.
Yes,
is completely. It's like you see that in something very similar at the end of Call Me by Your Name, with Elio sat by the fire. The difference is it's not reciprocated in that, or at least it doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, no, what you get in Call Me by Your Name is, you know, that
he will always love Armie Hammer's character.
Yes, and that has been an incredibly significant demarcating point in his life, and that now he will be alone. You know, whereas actually this has a much more complex idea, a much more inclusive idea of love. In this film, there are many types of love, right? And they're not exclusive to each other. You know, kind of, you can have a good man and not fancy him, you know, and actually you can have sex and love that good man and not necessarily fancy him, you know, and likewise you can be lifelong loves, you know, with a woman who lives in another continent and not want to be in a relationship with them, or not choose to end up being in a relationship with them. You might want but not choose. And actually, so all of these gradations of choice, of difference, of complications to life that, you know, Disobedience brings out in a very, very beautiful way, was actually Call Me by Your Name simplifies them.
Yeah, which and it's a tragic ending in Call Me by Your Name, essentially mournful, and you know the differences in this that like I say the similarity I'm picking up on is the idea that this love is lifelong. But as I say, yeah, obviously the difference is that in the one film it's mournful, and in this there's a kind of celebratory aspect to it. There's an openness and an honesty to it at the end.
Well, it's
reciprocal. There hasn't been throughout. Well, but I'm also including the husband in that as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's an honesty, because what's also interesting is that, you know, it's stated that the three of them were best friends when they were kids. It's not it wasn't just the two girls.
Yes.
They were three good friends when they were kids, and then the thing was when Rachel Weisz left. And she Rachel McAdams was sort of talked into marrying him. Part of the reasoning was he's your best friend.
Yes.
You know, so it's not just he's some guy who's good in the community. They're very close, and so that the relationship, the kind of love triangle, if you like, has become open, become honest.
The film bursts that love triangle in the sense that, you know, they're not, at the end of the film, they're no longer in competition with each other. They're a part of each other.
Yeah.
You know, so there's no triangle. There's just a kind of, you know, a unit feeling, which kind of feels slightly different about you know, every aspect, right? But what's not at stake is the fact that they are real feelings and a depth of feeling for each other. For all three of them together, which I think, I mean, you know, it's so much more complicated and interesting, and feels truer to life, and also things that make you think about life, you know, than Call Me by Your Name, which I think it's a greater film.
And there's a feeling of just kind of like something like maybe you can just love who you love, and it doesn't, and kind of demarcations of being gay or being straight or whatever aren't actually enormously important. Like, it's interesting to me actually that I felt when the two women make love in the hotel room, it occurred to me, Rachel McAdams is cheating on her husband, which she is, but it doesn't feel like it.
No.
Doesn't feel like it.
It's
She's
like
rediscovering and rekindling her love with Rachel Weisz, but it doesn't feel like a betrayal of her husband.
No, it's an explosion of feeling is what it is, really. And actually what I also found very beautiful, and again, this is why I think the film is so great, because it is so perceptive and attuned about the complexities of life. Because, at the moment where in the synagogue he gives her her freedom and he walks out and he's all by himself and she chases after him to comfort him, right? So, that's a whole other kind of love, and it's very real and it's very heartfelt and it has depth, right? Her first impulse is to comfort him, not to go after her, right? Like, there are real, I think all of those gradations of feeling and different types of love, and how they intermesh and they don't necessarily contradict, and and so on, all of that I think is very, very beautiful in the film.
I think what's moving to me about the two women is that they're able to gain something that that had been kept from them, or they were restricted from having. But what's moving about the husband is he learns a certain degree of humility, I think. I think there is. It's not that he's arrogant, but there is a kind of heir apparent thing going on with him.
There's a certainty about his life.
Right. He's going to be the next rabbi.
Yes.
And there's that meeting where he's offered the position, or kind of informally offered the position by a kind of group of elder sort of Jewish pillars of the community in a back room, and it has that feeling of like a backroom deal.
Well, he says, "I keep my house in order."
Right. So it has this feeling of like a high political backroom deal thing. That like the machinations of the upper echelons of society, right? Like an Illuminati. It has that feeling to it, and so as you say, there's a certainty about his life, and it's not that he's arrogant, but he's got things sorted out, and he clearly, it's very, very clear by the end of the film that he has known all along that his wife doesn't love him, not romantic, not in that way,
right,
and
doesn't desire him, and that when they go through the motions on a Friday night, there's Rachel Weisz asks her, do you sleep with each other on Friday night, and it's the suggestion of it's kind of culturally expected that you do so, which I thought, I didn't know that. Maybe I should be Jewish. Well,
but it's like, and it has that. Again, this was actually when I first saw it, because I didn't have the context. This was a banality that you see her in this loveless sex scene with her husband. I thought, oh god, see that like Shape of Water or whatever you want to mention, the woman just not having fun while she's having sex, sort of thing, stuck in a loveless marriage. At the time was a banality, and then the context changes.
It becomes very different. Yeah.
Not to labour the point, but that's kind of what I like about what happens to the husband is that he learns a little bit of humility, and he learns some honesty with it. He's actually honest with himself as much as anyone else. He's honest with himself that his wife doesn't desire him.
I think he's lovely and evolved.
Yeah.
And generous, actually. I think he's an amazing character, and very much the equal of the Rachel McAdams and Rachel Weisz character. Though I think above all, and I don't think it's just my prejudice. I just think she's extraordinary. I really do.
Rachel Weisz?
Yeah, I do. I think.
Have you seen The Fountain?
No, what is that?
Oh, we should watch it. It's Darren Aronofsky. It's mad, and it's sort of his 2001 or whatever kind of mad sort of time traveling sci-fi huge epic picture about ideas you care to mention, and I loved it from the moment I saw it. we should watch it at some point, and it's got racial vices. I think it's when they were married.
Okay.
So she was kind of his muse at the time.
Right.
And then it became Jennifer Lawrence needed mother. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
whoever he's going out with, he makes a mad film about him.
let's wrap this up, because I think we've been going on for a while. I just think this is a truly great film in ways that surprised me, and also kind of challenged the way that I normally look at films, because in some ways it's very simple, or it feels very simple, and kind of as the film unfolds, you get kind of a layering of all of these complications that make it, to me, both really rich and very deeply moving.
Yeah, I think I would definitely like it more the second time. Those reservations that I have about what I felt were banalities and even poor writing at times are absolutely true, and I felt them. But I would feel them less on a second viewing, because I think knowing how things transpire informs everything and recontextualizes a lot of what you see.
Right.
And would improve it. And I would probably find it more moving. But I did find it moving.
Nice.
So as I say, I think for me it improved. But part of the reason it improved was because I learned more, and the more I understood about it, the more it was clear to me how complex these people were, and how interesting the story was, and how moving it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And I love how seriously it kind of takes Jewish culture and portrays it. And like I say, I like the fact that it's unapologetic about it's. Remember what people said about The Wire, that like you have to watch The Wire for at least 6 or 7 episodes to understand even what they're saying, because it just embeds you in the world of the kind of slang of that environment. This has that feeling to it. It's not inaccessible, but if you don't understand very much about kind of Jewish life or Jewish traditions and customs, it'll probably take you a bit to pick up on it. But I like the fact that it doesn't dumb anything down. And it shows complete respect for the culture that it's building on.
And aside from that, there is the relationship between McAdams and Weisz, and there is Weiss's face, which I just really do think that it conveys kind of, both the kind of the wisdom and also the sorrow, about what it is to be human. I mean, and particularly does so in this film, really. So go see it.
It's very, very good. And so we're eavesdropping at the movies. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and eavesdroppingatthemovies.com is the website. Cheerio.
Bye bye.